Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. US-Taiwan relations remain uncertain. Hurricane Melissa causes widespread Caribbean damage. Senate negotiations seek shutdown resolution. Involvement in Sudan executions verified. El-Fasher killings, Sudan conflict and killings spark international outrage with RSF massacre. Trump announces when RS's resolving plans and Heist results in arrests. U.S. military targets drug trafficking. Ontario and Canada resolve tariff dispute. Liberals win Dutch election. Rob Jetten to lead Netherlands. US-Taiwan relations amidst strategic uncertainty. Recent news articles detail a complex and evolving landscape of US-Taiwan relations, characterized by strategic uncertainty and a focus on bolstering Taiwan's defense capabilities amidst growing Chinese assertiveness. The core issue revolves around the timing and effectiveness of US support for Taiwan, particularly given President Donald Trump's assessment that China will not invade the island during his term. The Trump administration's strategy centers on transforming Taiwan into a porcupine, a defense posture designed to deter aggression through asymmetric warfare, while simultaneously avoiding actions that could provoke China. This involves encouraging Taiwan to increase its own military spending and purchasing additional U.S. military equipment. Although production delays due to the ongoing war in Ukraine are creating a significant backlog. Despite Trump's confidence, concerns persist among Taiwanese officials regarding the potential for a delayed U.S. response, as a failure to act decisively before 2029 could leave Taiwan vulnerable. The administration's reluctance to immediately deploy U.S. weapons stockpiles to Taiwan, despite previous agreements, further fuels these anxieties. China's intentions remain a central concern, with senior Communist Party officials reportedly planning to further integrate Taiwan economically as part of Beijing's broader reunification strategy. The Pentagon's delayed national defense strategy and internal disagreements over prioritizing U.S. military resources between the Western Hemisphere and the Pacific add to the uncertainty. The U.S. is pushing Taiwan to accelerate its own defense preparations, including increased military spending and the acquisition of U.S.-made weaponry. However, the timeline for fulfilling these demands is hampered by production delays and the administration's cautious approach to bolstering Taiwan's defenses. The situation is further complicated by Trump's belief that China will not invade Taiwan during his term, which some Taiwanese officials worry could diminish the urgency of U.S. support. The administration's approach reflects a delicate balancing act between deterring Chinese aggression and avoiding actions that could escalate tensions. Ultimately, the future of U.S.-Taiwan relations hinges on Taiwan's ability to strengthen its own defenses, coupled with the U.S.'s willingness to provide sustained support, navigating a period of strategic ambiguity and heightened geopolitical risk. Hurricane Melissa devastates Caribbean, leaving widespread damage and growing concerns. Hurricane Melissa, a rapidly intensifying Category 5 storm, has unleashed catastrophic damage across the Caribbean, triggering widespread fear and prompting urgent humanitarian responses. Initial reports detail the storm's devastating impact on Jamaica, Cuba, and the Bahamas, with significant destruction and numerous casualties reported. The storm's initial landfall in Jamaica brought sustained winds exceeding 295 kilometers per hour, generating destructive winds and torrential rainfall. Residents described a terrifying experience, with reports of homes and businesses being completely destroyed, cars submerged in debris-filled water, and trees uprooted. Jamaica experienced particularly severe damage, with St. Elizabeth Parish reporting extensive destruction and casualties. Residents described a catastrophic situation, expressing gratitude for their survival amidst the chaos. The storm's passage through Jamaica prompted immediate emergency response efforts, with local authorities struggling to cope with the scale of the devastation. Moving on to Cuba, Hurricane Melissa caused significant damage, though initial reports suggested a less severe impact compared to Jamaica. The storm's trajectory towards the Bahamas has raised further concerns, with authorities preparing for potential damage and implementing evacuation measures. The storm's impact extends beyond the immediate physical damage, causing disruption to communication networks and hindering rescue operations. Many residents, particularly in Jamaica, have been cut off from contact with the outside world, adding to the anxiety and uncertainty. Numerous organizations, including the Association of Jamaican Nationals in the UK, are coordinating relief efforts with a focus on providing assistance to affected communities. Residents are expressing optimism, fueled by faith, while acknowledging the immense challenges ahead. The situation remains fluid, with ongoing assessments of the full extent of the damage and the need for continued support. The storm's intensity and rapid movement have presented significant logistical hurdles for rescue teams. Rank-and-file senators engage in shadow negotiation in search for shutdown, and a group of Republican and Democratic senators are engaged in a dual-track negotiation aimed at resolving the 29-day government shutdown. The talks focus on two primary goals: reopening the government within weeks and establishing a long-term funding agreement for key departments, including the U.S. Department of Agriculture's food stamp program. Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin is involved, stating that the conversations represent a shadow negotiation to achieve clarity on voting priorities. Despite Republican leadership's insistence on linking government reopening to Democratic agreement on enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies, senators are exploring full-year appropriations bills as a potential off-ramp. Senator Mike Rounds expressed optimism that these bills could prevent future shutdowns, while Senator Jan Shaheen confirmed the party's interest in pursuing them. Senator Lisa Murkowski, a key voice on the Senate Appropriations Committee, described the discussions as encouraging, emphasizing the need for a clear diagram outlining the path to resolution. Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democratic minority leader, indicated that Republican offers hadn't shifted significantly, advocating for a combined approach to health care and food assistance. However, the core issue remains the Republican demand for Democratic support on the subsidies. Several senators, including Baldwin and Shaheen, are cautiously optimistic that a breakthrough is possible, citing ongoing conversations and a willingness to explore alternative funding mechanisms. Rounds suggested a vote on the full-year appropriations bills could occur as early as next week, contingent on leadership agreement. Murkowski echoed this sentiment, stressing the need for a familiar approach, while Schumer reiterated the importance of addressing both health care and food assistance simultaneously. The negotiations highlight a growing frustration among rank-and-file senators, who believe a pragmatic solution is within reach if leadership can overcome their entrenched positions. The talks represent a fresh sign of optimism in a previously bleak Capitol landscape, as lawmakers grapple with the escalating consequences of the shutdown, including the imminent lapse of food stamp benefits. Verifying new evidence of RSF involvement in Sudan civil war executions, the BBC has reported the emergence of new evidence suggesting the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, were directly involved in the execution of civilians during the ongoing conflict in Sudan. While details surrounding the specific incidents are still being verified, the reported findings represent a significant escalation in the allegations of war crimes committed by both sides of the brutal civil war. The investigation is focused on meticulously examining available data and testimonies to establish a definitive link between RSF actions and the deaths of civilians. Simultaneously, a BBC Verify report has shed light on the methodology used to determine the most deprived areas within England. The Index of Multiple Deprivation, a comprehensive ranking system, assesses England's 33,755 neighborhoods, averaging around 1,500 residents per area. This index employs a complex algorithm combining 55 distinct indicators, including income levels, employment rates, educational attainment, healthcare access, crime statistics, housing barriers, and environmental factors. The ranking process identifies Middlesbrough as having the highest percentage of neighborhoods classified as most deprived, followed closely by Birmingham and Hartlepool. It's crucial to understand that the index doesn't represent the financial status of every individual within a deprived area. Rather, it provides a broad measure of disadvantage based on the combined impact of these key indicators. Local councils, such as Tendring, which oversees JWIC, have utilized the index to inform resource allocation. Following the assessment of JWIC's high deprivation level, Tendring agreed a substantial 20-year improvement plan valued at $426 million. This exemplifies how governmental bodies leverage data-driven insights to strategically target interventions and support vulnerable communities. The ongoing investigation into the RSF's involvement in Sudan executions complements this understanding of localized deprivation and the need for targeted support. RSF violence in El-Fasher sparks international outrage. The ongoing conflict in Sudan has escalated dramatically, with reports of widespread violence and civilian casualties in El-Fasher, Darfur. The Rapid Support Forces, RF, led by Gen. Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo Hemedti, have been accused of carrying out mass killings, including the execution of patients and visitors at the Saudi hospital, a partially functioning medical facility. Following the capture of El-Fasher, the RSF denies responsibility, claiming civilians fled and no hospitals were operational. However, evidence, including satellite imagery and social media footage, corroborates reports of the hospital massacre, with estimates of 450 deaths, including 200 inpatients and 250 outpatients and visitors. International condemnation is mounting, with the UN Security Council holding an emergency session. British Foreign Office Minister Stephen Doughty expressed unconscionable suffering and evidence of summary executions. The UN World Health Organization, WHO, is appalled by the scale of the deaths. The RSF's actions are fueling fears of ethnic targeting, particularly against non-Arab populations, despite denials. The situation is further complicated by the geographic division of Sudan, with the RSF controlling western Sudan and Kordofan, while the army maintains control of Khartoum and surrounding regions. Approximately 250,000 people, largely from non-Arab communities, remain trapped in El-Fasher. Following the RSF takeover, an estimated 5,000 people have fled to Talla, suffering trauma, abuse, and violence along the way. The Sudan Doctors Network reports increased air, drone strikes, and artillery shelling on the hospital, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Activists are demanding international pressure on the United Arab Emirates, UAE, suspected of providing military support to the RSF. Solidarités International confirms instances of rape and gender-based violence. The ongoing conflict represents a critical humanitarian disaster, with a growing number of displaced individuals and significant concerns about human rights violations. The RSF's actions are intensifying the struggle for control of Sudan and threatening to destabilize the entire region. The El-Fasher killings echo the Darfur genocide, the ongoing civil war in Sudan, primarily between the Rapid Support Forces, (RSF) and the military, is increasingly resembling the Darfur genocide of the early 2000s, with the systematic killings in El-Fasher serving as a stark reminder of the country's violent past. The fall of El-Fasher, after an 18-month RSF siege, has witnessed widespread atrocities, including summary executions, ethnic targeting, and the deliberate deprivation of essential resources. The RSF, originating from the Janjaweed militias led by Gen. Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo Himiti, has been accused of perpetrating these crimes, denying involvement while acknowledging violations. Evidence, including survivor accounts, videos shared by RSF fighters, and satellite imagery from Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab, paints a grim picture of deliberate ethnic cleansing, particularly targeting Zagawa civilians deemed legitimate targets by the RSF. The pattern involves encircling towns, cutting off supplies, and then overwhelming populations with arson, sexual violence, and massacres. This strategy, repeatedly demonstrated, is designed to destroy and displace communities. The international community's failure to intervene despite repeated warnings and meetings with UN Security Council members, the US, UK, and France, is a central concern. Activists and aid organizations stress that the predictable nature of the violence, coupled with a lack of immediate action, risks repeating the past. The UAE's alleged support for the RSF is also under scrutiny, mirroring the situation during the Srebrenica massacre, which prompted international intervention. Himeti's recent admission of violations and the promise of an investigation are viewed with skepticism, given previous unfulfilled promises following similar accusations. The decentralized nature of the RSF, comprised of militias and mercenaries, further complicates accountability. The situation in El-Fasher highlights the urgent need for robust protection measures and decisive international action to prevent further loss of life and potential escalation of the conflict, emphasizing the importance of immediate, kinetic options to safeguard civilians. The parallels to the Srebrenica massacre underscore the critical need for proactive intervention, not just reactive responses. Sudan conflict escalates. RF massacre at El-Fasher Hospital at the Rapid Support Forces. RSF militia is accused of carrying out a horrific massacre at the main hospital in El-Fasher, killing an estimated 460 people, including patients, their companions, and medical staff, as reported by the UN's health agency. The Sudan Doctors Network described the attack on the Saudi hospital as cold-bloodedly killing everyone they found inside, with no stated casualty figures. The RSF is also implicated in kidnapping 6 medics, demanding ransoms exceeding 150,000 for their release. The El-Fasher Resistance Committee reported a horrifying silence following the attack. The capture of El-Fasher, the army's last stronghold in Darfur, marks a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict. The UN, activists, and aid agencies express grave concerns for the fate of the approximately 250,000 people trapped in the city, many of whom belong to non-Arab ethnic groups, a key allegation against the RSF. A communications blackout hinders accurate reporting, but new videos circulating on social media show RSF fighters executing unarmed individuals. Those who managed to escape El-Fasher, primarily to the town of Tooila, describe extreme violence, intense shelling, and RSF actions including filming, beating, theft, and ransom demands for captured individuals, with some resulting in executions. Jan Egeland, a former UN humanitarian official, characterizes the situation as catastrophic, citing massacres compounded by months of deprivation, starvation, and lack of medical care, labeling it the worst place on Earth and the biggest humanitarian emergency on Earth. Since April 2023, the WHO has verified 185 attacks on healthcare facilities, resulting in 204 deaths. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the head of the WHO, demands an immediate and unconditional cessation of all attacks on healthcare facilities and the protection of patients, health personnel, and facilities under international humanitarian law. The capture of El-Fasher effectively divides the country, with the RSF controlling most of Darfur, Kordofan, and parts of Khartoum, while the army maintains control of the capital and surrounding regions. The warring factions, once allies, have fallen out over the transition to civilian rule, creating a complex and deeply destabilizing conflict. Trump announces plan to resume nuclear testing. President Donald Trump has declared his intention to initiate nuclear weapons testing, signaling a potential shift in U.S. nuclear policy and escalating tensions with Russia and China. This announcement occurred shortly before a scheduled meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea, intended to address broader global stability concerns. Trump stated that the United States currently possesses the largest nuclear arsenal, trailing behind Russia but catching up, and that the U.S. would now engage in testing on par with other global nuclear powers. The move follows recent developments involving Russia and China, who have reportedly constructed new facilities and dug tunnels at their respective nuclear test sites in recent years, as revealed by satellite imagery. This suggests a renewed commitment to nuclear capabilities within these nations. The U.S. last conducted a nuclear test in 1992, following a voluntary moratorium. Key players involved include the United States, Russia, and China, all possessing significant nuclear arsenals. Russia holds the largest stockpile, while the U.S. is actively working to close the gap. China's expansion of its nuclear infrastructure further underscores the potential for a new arms race. The announcement has prompted concern about increased global instability, particularly in Asia, where nuclear-armed nations like India and Pakistan, alongside North Korea, are closely monitored. North Korea, responsible for the most recent nuclear test in 2017, has recently intensified its nuclear combat posture. Furthermore, diplomatic efforts are underway to address the situation, with discussions focusing on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has expressed its hope that the U.S. will uphold its commitment to suspending nuclear testing. The timing of Trump's announcement carries significant implications for regional security and international relations, demanding careful consideration of potential consequences. Louvre heist: 7 arrests. No recovered jewels as of today. 7 individuals have been arrested in connection with the audacious theft of French crown jewels from the Louvre Museum, a crime that has garnered international attention. Investigations have revealed a complex operation involving at least 4 primary suspects, with 7 now under formal investigation. The total value of the stolen items, estimated at over 100 million, includes a significant collection of jewels gifted by Napoleon, such as the emerald necklace with over 1,000 diamonds. The initial 2 suspects, both men in their 30s with prior criminal records, were apprehended attempting to flee to Algeria and France respectively. They have partially admitted their involvement after 96 hours of questioning, and their DNA was linked to broken display cases. The first suspect is of Algerian nationality and had traffic-related offenses, while the second was an illegal taxi driver. 5 additional suspects were arrested Wednesday night in Paris and surrounding areas, including Seine-Saint-Denis. One of these individuals is believed to have been part of the 4-man gang directly involved in the heist, disguised as construction workers. DNA evidence from one of the suspects was found on a scooter used by the thieves. Investigators have uncovered a sophisticated operation utilizing a furniture elevator to access the Apollo Gallery, where a disc cutter was used to breach display cases. Security vulnerabilities at the Louvre have been highlighted, with the Louvre's director admitting that no cameras were monitoring the balcony used by the thieves. The investigation is ongoing, with authorities expressing cautious optimism about the potential recovery of the stolen jewels, suggesting they may be dismantled for their raw materials. The arrests have prompted a review of security protocols at France's cultural institutions, and the Bank of France has transferred the jewels to its most secure vault. The investigation is focused on identifying the remaining suspect and securing the recovery of the priceless artifacts. U.S. military escalates drug trafficking strikes in Pacific and Caribbean. The United States military has significantly escalated its operations targeting suspected drug trafficking vessels in the Pacific Ocean and Caribbean Sea, resulting in the deaths of at least 61 individuals over the past 2 months. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced the latest strike, the 14th known U.S. military operation, which resulted in the death of 4 individuals aboard a vessel identified as involved in illicit narcotics smuggling. These operations began in early September and have involved the targeting of 15 boats. The Trump administration's strategy centers on authorizing lethal strikes against a broad range of cartels and suspected drug traffickers, supported by a classified legal opinion arguing that the president possesses the authority to utilize deadly force when these groups pose an imminent threat to Americans. Previous strikes, totaling 14, occurred in the Pacific, with one survivor identified. This latest action, conducted in international waters, marks a significant expansion of the administration's campaign. Concerns are mounting regarding the legality of these unilateral actions, with Democrats on Capitol Hill expressing outrage over the lack of briefings regarding the strikes. Senator Mark Warner, vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, criticized the administration's approach, stating that decisions about military force are not political strategy sessions. The Republican-led Senate previously blocked a push to limit Trump's authority without congressional authorization. The administration's strategy includes deploying warships, fighter jets, Marines, spy planes, bombers, and drones to the Caribbean, including the world's largest warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford. There are fears that the U.S. military buildup is aimed at removing Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro from power, with allegations that the U.S. seeks to seize the country's natural resources. The U.S. does not recognize Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate leader, following disputed elections in 2024. The administration's aggressive stance has raised international tensions and fueled concerns about potential escalation. Ontario's Ford demands apology over tariff dispute between a heated exchange between U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra and Ontario Trade Representative David Paterson has prompted Ontario Premier Doug Ford to demand an apology, escalating tensions between the two nations. The dispute centers around a television advertisement produced by the Ontario government criticizing U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs. The ad utilizes a quote from Ronald Reagan, highlighting the detrimental effects of tariffs on American businesses. The exchange, described by CBC News as an expletive-laced tirade, occurred following the advertisement's release, which aimed to influence public opinion in conservative areas supportive of Trump. The ad has garnered over 1 billion impressions and achieved significant global exposure, including airing during the first two World Series games between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Los Angeles Dodgers, which Ford considers the most successful ad in North American history. President Trump responded to the advertisement by threatening to increase tariffs on Canadian imports by an additional 10%, building upon existing 35% tariffs on certain goods. However, the U.S. Senate recently voted to approve a resolution that would terminate the national emergency used to impose tariffs, resulting in a 54-6 vote. Despite this legislative action, the resolution is unlikely to pass the U.S. House of Representatives. The original exchange between Hoekstra and Paterson involved strong language, with Ford famously stating, the cheese slipped off the cracker. I get it, you're ticked off, but call the guy up and apologize. It's simple. The situation underscores the ongoing friction between the Trump administration and the Canadian government regarding trade policies. The existing tariffs, which include 50% on steel and aluminum and 25% on automobiles, represent a significant trade barrier. The dispute highlights the differing priorities of the two nations and the potential for further trade disruptions. The future of trade talks between Canada and the United States remains uncertain given the current climate. Senate rejects Trump's Canada tariffs in symbolic vote. A significant vote in the Senate on Tuesday saw 4 Republican senators Rand Paul, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and former Republican leader Mitch McConnell joined Democrats in passing a resolution aimed at terminating President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. The vote 50-46 represented a rebuke of the administration's trade policies, following a similar vote to end tariffs on Brazil. These 4 senators had previously opposed the Canada tariffs in April. The resolution targets the emergency declaration that authorized the tariffs, effectively ending them. However, the move is largely symbolic, as the House of Representatives is expected to block any further consideration. House Republicans have already taken steps to prevent future votes on Trump's tariffs. Senator Rand Paul was a co-sponsor of the resolution, and Senator McConnell publicly stated his intention to vote for each of the proposed resolutions this week. The Democratic co-sponsor, Senator Tim Kaine, criticized the administration's justification for the tariffs, arguing that the claim of an emergency due to fentanyl flowing from Canada was a pretext to increase tariffs. Kaine highlighted the administration's apparent willingness to escalate tariffs based on political disagreements. The debate centers around the administration's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The Democrats argue that this action is inappropriate, while the administration initially presented it as a response to the opioid crisis. The vote signifies a challenge to Trump's trade policies and underscores the growing partisan divide on trade issues. Kaine believes that the president is responsive to such actions, and that even small numbers of Republican opposition can influence his behavior. The resolution's impact remains largely symbolic, but it represents a notable statement against the administration's trade policies. The Dutch election Liberals narrowly prevail in tight finish. The Dutch general election concluded with a surprising outcome, as Rob Jetten's centrist liberal D66 party emerged as the largest, narrowly defeating Geert Wilders' Anti-Islam Freedom Party, PVV. Despite initial exit polls favoring Wilders, D66's campaign, spearheaded by the photogenic 38-year-old Jetten, proved remarkably successful, securing an estimated 26 seats, just shy of the 30 seats needed for a majority. This outcome represents a significant shift in Dutch politics, driven by voters' desire for stability after Wilders' tumultuous attempts to form a government. Wilders, who led the polls throughout the campaign, conceded a challenging result, acknowledging his party's reduced seat count to 37 from 2023, attributing it partly to his own actions of dissolving the previous coalition. He maintained his intention to attempt forming a government if D66 secures the top vote share. However, the reality is that few parties are willing to work with him due to his controversial views. The election highlighted a deep-seated desire among Dutch voters for a stable government, rejecting Wilders' divisive rhetoric. Jetten's strategy focused on presenting himself as a pragmatic leader capable of building a broad coalition. He is now seeking a government comprised of D66, the conservative liberal VVD led by Dylan Jesselgos, and the Christian Democrats, despite Jesselgos's stated opposition to working with the left. Frans Timmermans' left-wing Labour Green Left Party experienced a significant setback, finishing fourth and leading to Timmermans' decision to step down. The election underscored a generational shift in Dutch politics, with voters seemingly willing to embrace a new approach. Wilders, despite his continued bullishness, faces an uphill battle in securing a governing position. The outcome signifies a rejection of extremist ideologies and a renewed emphasis on consensus building in the Netherlands. The need for a coalition that can unite the country after a divisive campaign is paramount. Rob Jetten poised to lead Netherlands amidst tight election race. The upcoming Dutch election has placed 38-year-old Rob Jetten, leader of the D66 party, as a leading contender to become the Netherlands' prime minister, marking a potential first for the nation with an openly gay leader. Jetten's rapid rise to prominence, transforming D66 from fifth place to the top of Dutch politics within 2 years, has been remarkable, fueled by a highly polished campaign and his ability to command significant media attention. This success contrasts sharply with the divisive rhetoric of anti-Islam populist Geert Wilders, who is vying for the most seats in parliament. Jetten's strategy centered around a positive, optimistic message, Het kan wel, echoing Barack Obama's "We can," effectively countering Wilders' approach. His campaign success is partly attributed to his ability to consistently appear on television, exemplified by his participation in a TV quiz show. Critically, D66 avoided entanglement in Wilders' earlier, unsuccessful coalition attempt, largely due to Jetten's performance in the 2023 election, which saw the party achieve only 9 seats. Jetten's personal background, growing up in a small Brabant town, coming out as gay at a young age, and his engagement to Argentine hockey player Nicolas Keenan, has been deliberately kept private, though he has previously used his platform to advocate for an international day against homophobia. His career path includes roles at Dutch rail network ProRail and serving as climate minister under Mark Rutte, though his ambition was curtailed by the energy crisis triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Despite initial criticisms of his campaign as being dull and labeled Robot Jetten, Jetten's strategic use of optimistic messaging and consistent media presence proved successful. The election outcome remains uncertain, but Jetten's ability to connect with voters and present a forward-looking vision positions him as a strong candidate to lead the Netherlands. Tanzania election protests and concerns following disputed results. Following a marred election process characterized by unrest and accusations of fraud, widespread protests have erupted across Tanzania. Opposition supporters clashed with police, particularly in major cities like Dodoma, Dar es Salaam, and Mwanza, with reports of gunfire and tear gas usage. The Electoral Commission's initial announcements, showing President Samia Suluhu Hassan securing nearly 95% of the vote in several provinces, including Membi, have fueled skepticism and accusations of a rigged election. The European Union has labeled the election a fraud, unfolding for months, deeming it neither free nor fair. The protests involve significant disruption, including road closures at the border with Kenya. where one person is feared dead and hundreds of Tanzanians have crossed into Kenyan territory to blockade roads and engage in demonstrations. Internet connectivity remains severely disrupted, a situation Amnesty International views as exacerbating tensions. The government has responded with a citywide curfew in Dar es Salaam and ordered civil servants to work from home. Key figures include President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who is widely expected to secure a second term, and Tundu Lissu, the main opposition leader currently detained on treason charges. Luhaga Paina, the only other serious contender, was disqualified due to legal technicalities. 16 fringe parties were cleared to participate, further diminishing the opposition's chances. The situation is compounded by reports of civilian and police officer deaths during clashes, prompting calls for unrestricted access to information. Protesters are utilizing walkie-talk app, Zello, to coordinate their actions. The international community, including the US Embassy, has expressed concerns regarding the shrinking political space and the targeting of critics through arrest and alleged abductions. The disputed election, coupled with these concerns, has ignited significant unrest and raised questions about the future of democracy in Tanzania. The BBC reports ongoing efforts to maintain order while addressing the escalating tensions.